right now. Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Yes, we do, and good evening, everyone. This is Bob Pompeani. We're live tonight in the Fan Cave at 412-575-2600. I am here. Chris Mueller's up at 93.7 The Fan. And this was a day where high school, college players, we talk about transfer portals, NIL, but this was a day that high school guys would sign a letter of intent day, early signing period, whatever you want to call it these days, because everything has changed. But, Chris, we saw a guy who I really thought was destined for Virginia Tech. He ended up at West Virginia. You know, Matt Sig is one of the best players in this area, a four-star quality player, led Fort Cherry to championships. He's put up big numbers. Everyone presumed once he decommitted from Penn State that he would end up with James Franklin in another place. But he pulled a little bit of surprise today. Were you surprised when you heard that news?
Only in the sense that it was West Virginia and maybe not some other school swooping in to do what I'm going to presume West Virginia did, which was make him a very healthy financial offer to acquire his services. And
someone who could play offense. He's always wanted to play. I've done a couple of stories with him, and offense was on his list. I don't know if other schools looked at him as an offensive player as much maybe as West Virginia did.
Well, I mean, I think that is part of it, but it is a small part. If this were a pie, Bob, that is one slice, and then the rest of the pie is whatever West Virginia's offer was. I do think Virginia Tech is beefing up their finances, and I think in time they will be able to match any offer like that, because it seems like they're going to back James Franklin to the hilt. But it is kind of funny, isn't it? Like, used to be if a guy committed to a place like this that nobody expected him to go, you'd go, well, was there a paper bag full of cash on his doorstep? You know, was there a sports car parked outside? Now we can just say it out in the open. They made a much more competitive offer to a four-star player. I don't think James Franklin is complaining, though, Bob, because I think he probably, from last I checked, put the finishing touches on Virginia Tech's first top 25 class since 2018. At last check, Penn State had the 150th recruiting class in the country. Yep. I believe they were ahead of Prairie View A&M, which is, you know, good for them, big time for Penn State. Pat Kraft, not to take this in this direction, has bungled that search in spectacular fashion.
Which is why our question of the night on the KDKA.com Connect Penn West University poll is who will be hired as Penn State's head coach. Now, they did this almost 2 months ago, I thought, in an attempt to jumpstart and get ahead of everybody else. But all they've done is made a lot of other money for other coaches. And here's your list: Terry Smith, Brian Dable, Mike Tomlin. We only put that in there because Ben Roethlisberger brought it up, and other. My guess at this point would be, I don't know if they have thoughts of Caleb DeBoer down in Alabama, if they should lose. You know, this, I have no idea. I see people talking about that, but, you know, he's in a pretty good spot in Alabama.
He would have had to lose the Iron Bowl, Bob.
What's
I think
that?
If he loses the Iron Bowl, I think if he had lost the Iron Bowl,
right,
which he almost did, then I think you might have a movement from Alabama people, because they are, just to be very clear here, completely insane about the standards for that football program, especially in this new era where I think there's a little more parity. They might have wanted to run him out of town, and DeBoer might have said, forget about this, I'll go to Penn State. Like, comparatively, that's like a place where the expectations aren't as high. I would go with Dable of those three. It's obviously not going to be Mike Tomlin. I don't think it's going to be Terry Smith. We know there's a Dable and Terry Pegula connection, and Pegula is obviously a guy who wields a heavy hand at Penn State. But I also think the more interesting part of this is the fact that many of the clients, or the candidates Penn State was pursuing are clients of Jimmy Sexton and the Creative Artists Agency. Yeah. And we know this from the reporting that James Franklin tried to get himself a contract extension before this past season in the summer, and Penn State, Pat Kraft, balked at it, and that means he and Jimmy Sexton were probably at loggerheads. And I don't think it's a stretch, Bob, just to be very clear about what I'm saying here, that a very powerful agent who is the Scott Boras of college football coaching agents might have decided to try to get all his guys raises while making sure none of them actually took the Penn State job by dissuading them from doing it once they got what they wanted from their current school.
And he made a lot of money. We're going to talk about that when we come back, how much money that some people have estimated Pat Kraft got for other guys. And it's funny how it all worked out. One thing about Pitt, they had a pretty good day also, 21 signed guys, and they do that every year. They put a heavy concentration on high school players, and that's good. I think you saw this year. You have a freshman quarterback. You have a freshman running back, both very talented, but they need to keep them. That's the problem I think Pitt will have as time goes on. When we come back, we'll open up the phone calls at 412-575-2600. We'd like to hear from you on that, on anything else you'd like to talk about in the way of Steelers, Penguins, Pirates. You name it, we talk about it right here on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. We're live tonight on KDKA Plus and 93.7 The Fan. All right, here we go. This is our Xfinity tweet of the night. And you can see here, according to this, that $370 million in extension money was handed out to guys who were rumored to be Penn State's next head coach. Kurt Cignetti probably tops the list. Matt Rule was on that list. Now we saw the BYU guy, Kalani Sitake. Yeah, he's a guy who's a very good coach, and I thought he was going to be the man. It was sort of a process of elimination that he would be the last man standing, but apparently they got some big donors out there who've stepped up and decided to not only invest in him, but also $150 million into their program. This is going to be interesting, and I wonder if there's a timeline. When do you think it would be? Because you do have recruiting. They only had 2 people in that 150th ranked recruiting class that you mentioned earlier. That's it, 2. Yeah, although one was a 4-star quarterback.
Well, First of all, with BYU, I mean, that's just how the cookie crumbles, Bob, because it's crumble cookie money. That's what kept Kalani Sitake there. I'm not kidding. If you've ever had those cookies, that's a BYU guy who, yeah, there you go. So, okay, that was one of the 2 big money guys who kept him at BYU. Penn State's timeline ought to be as soon as possible, but I get the distinct sense that if they wanted this done and just were saying we're going to get anybody in there, they would just elevate Terry Smith to the job and say, we're going to go on vibes here and hope that this works. But then look at the optics of that. Hey, we fired this guy just to elevate somebody on his staff to the job who is really a position coach by trade and hasn't really worked as anything higher in college football. That would be a terrible look. They're going to have to get somebody. I mean, I said weeks ago, Bob, that they should get Bob Chesney from JMU, and people kind of scoffed at that. Well, guess what? He found himself a new job. You've got, what, at USF, Brian Hartline, who I thought from Ohio State.
I thought he was going to be the guy.
I thought he would be the guy.
Yeah.
He took USF over Penn State. Well, hold on, I shouldn't say that. From what I heard, Penn State never really made like a serious offer to him. So USF swooped in and got the job done. Like I said, I think this is a bungling of the highest order by Pat Kraft. He got told no probably. He thought maybe he was going to get told no 1 or 2 times. He's gotten told no a bunch of times. You know who's like the last person at the bar here at 1:45 for last call with Pat Kraft? Brian Kelly, just sitting around out there. Bob, you laugh. You laugh, but what else? What other option would get like on people's radars?
How about Urban Meyer? He's been mentioned before.
He already said no to them.
Did he?
They talked to him. They went to him early.
Okay.
They went to him probably first, and he did not want to do it. I mean,
well, if it's
go to
Brian
Kelly. Let's hear him do a Yinzer accent.
I saw the combined money that LSU is paying out to 3 different coaches. Ed Orgeron still on that list at $17 million. Then it's Kelly, and now all the money with Lane Kiffin. It's a lot of money invested in your head coaches and still paying. It's almost going to be like the Bobby Bonilla show over there if we continue. All right, let's get to the phone lines. It's 412-575-2600. We're going to begin tonight with Jake, who's in Green Tree. Hello, Jake. How are you?
Hey, good evening, Bob and Chris.
Hey.
Hey, here's a tale of 2 clubs, 2 organizations that are going in the opposite direction, Penguins and the Steelers. So after, 10 years, Mike Sullivan's message obviously got stale. The team was struggling. They became such a poor defensive group. They were giving up so many chances. So it was time to make the change. And Dan Muse, from what I've heard around the team, the organization, is a real down-to-earth, and he obviously has a connection with a lot of these guys. And the infuse to bring in some of the younger guys, I'm really big on this Rutger McGroarty. I think he's going to be terrific. I hope he stays away from injuries, but I think he'll be good. And then on the other hand, you look at the Steelers. They're stuck in neutral. They're stuck in purgatory. And Chris, you threw out the question yesterday on your show. You and Andrew said that should Mike Tomlin be fired? Absolutely. Actually, it should have happened after last year. But a better question is, in terms of Rooney and Tomlin, does Rooney have the stones to do it?
Well, as I've said all along, before that ever happens, it'll be a mutual parting, whenever that is. Back to your first point about Muse, though, what I like about it, what he's doing, and Mike Sullivan did not do this, was that he's relying on 4 lines, and he doesn't matter if you're not one of the bigger players on that team. He's reduced ice times of some of their top players. I think that has an effect. For some reason, Chris, Erik Karlsson is playing some of the best defensive hockey of his career because he's normally a negative minus person, and he's been, largely good. Chris Letang still makes those mistakes once in a while, whatever. But their power play is better. They're using 4 lines. They rely on guys who didn't get as much playing time under Mike Sullivan. So I think that's a big step in the right direction for them.
Well, Mike Sullivan clearly had his guys that he liked and he trusted, and he would run them into the ground. I guess if we're going to keep using cross-sport analogies like Mike Tomlin used to with his running backs like Willie Parker, and then he would reap the negative outcomes of that with Sullivan when his team would just look gassed, or they would look gassed, excuse me. Muse has done a couple of things really well. He is rolling 4 lines a lot more. He clearly isn't playing favorites. He's playing young guys. You mentioned Karlsson. I think he's just getting through to these guys in a different way that Sullivan clearly couldn't, because Sullivan had a bunch of success, and then even when he stopped having success, he'd been there long enough and they had expressed belief in him enough that his message got stale because he didn't see a need to change it. And I've got to be honest, I do see a ton of parallels there with Mike Tomlin. The message has gotten stale. You notice, Bob, like when there's been a firestorm since the Fire Tomlin chants, it's made its way around the national media. Have you I know Ben said what he said on his podcast. James Harrison has been pretty critical of Tomlin. Have there been any players coming out of the woodwork who played for Mike previously who've laid down a vociferous defense of him? Because I truly have not heard any. I've only heard some pretty prominent former players kind of echo the fan sentiment.
Yeah, I haven't heard that either. I know players are getting involved, and with social media, it's a lot easier to do that, and you hear what they're saying. And I think most of them have come to the conclusion that it's just time for a mutual split. And we'll see what happens with this. The weird thing about this whole week, Chris, despite all of this stuff going on, there is a game, and it is the Ravens and the Steelers. And normally, when you head to a game, and if I had told you heading into Week 14, they'd be tied at the top of the division, it's a hated rivalry, these two going head-to-head, you would have had, we'd be doing live shots with people in Baltimore because they hate the Steelers and vice versa. Players would be talking nasty about one another. There's none of that going on right now. It's almost like both of these teams, and the Ravens are the same way. We had a guy on today who was talking about that down there in Baltimore. There's no vibe here. The Ravens are stuck in a certain way. They've been playing, even though they won 5 of 6, they've looked average in those wins. So it's a different dynamic that you normally see in advance of a game of this caliber.
Well, I think the Steelers, the vibe is absolutely different. I've talked to enough people who cover that team who would tell me or tell Andrew on the show as a guest, like, hey, guys, you're making something out of nothing. It's not going to change. I mean, almost everybody seems more open than they've ever been to the idea that this could be a real parting of ways here sooner rather than later. And a lot of it could hinge on how these last 5 games go. In that particular case, Bob, at least the Ravens have a pretty obvious excuse, at least obvious to my eyes. Maybe you disagree. Lamar Jackson's been one of the 4 worst quarterbacks by a particular stat. It's called EPA, expected points added per dropback, since he came back in Week 9, right? He's been one of the worst guys in the league. 4th worst. Only 3 guys worse, J.J. McCarthy, Shadur Sanders, and Aaron Rodgers. But at least in Lamar's case, he can say he's hurt. Where are the answers for the Steelers? That's a semi-rhetorical question because I'm not sure there are any right now.
Yeah, well, they better start finding them. If they're going to do anything, they still have a chance in this division here, as bad as it's been. I still think Cincinnati will be heard from for some reason. I just think they're sparking up their play at this point, and they have a big game in Buffalo this week. We'll see what happens with that, and if they should win it, head-to-head with Baltimore, and then 3 teams they should be favored to beat. We got to take a break, come back with more. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call right here on KDKA Plus and 93.7 The Fan. All right, welcome back. I want to remind you, tomorrow at the City County building on Grant Street, the Riverhounds will be celebrating their USL Championship. They'll have a nice ceremony for them over there. I know it'll be a little chilly out. Make sure you come down. If you're going to come down, bundle up, and you'll have the Eastern Conference Trophy and the USL Trophy on display after what was a historic season for the Riverhounds. Speaking of historic, we have an email here for a text tweet. I go right down the list. I may as well say Facebook. Ryan Zedek says,
fax? Do we have any faxes in? Has anybody sent something via teletype or Western
Chris,
Union
when you've been
Telegraph?
along as long as I have, I expect faxes instead of this stuff. It says, does it seem like Steelers are destined to just keep bringing in past prime players? And you know, look at this past offseason. When you look back, Juan Thornhill was brought in. Darius Slay was brought in. Both are no longer here. You know, you can say what you want about Jalen Ramsey. I think Minkah Fitzpatrick may be playing better than he is. Jonnu Smith was brought here in that same deal, and he hasn't really done all that much. Maybe that's scheme or just him or both, whatever the case may be. So, you know, you have all these players who were brought here for a reason, and right now it just isn't working. Adam Thielen said
he's going to retire at the end of this season, and they're bringing him in, and they are collecting baseball cards. It's all very temporary. I'll repeat this because I think it's a very relevant criticism. They've behaved lately like a team that's trying to win games 5 feet in front of their face instead of have any sort of long-term plan. Like if somebody actually were to ask me, hey, do you sense a vision, or do you get a vision of what the Steelers roster-wise even are trying to build in the long term, and which in football is maybe 3 to 4 years out? You're trying to think about having your team look a certain way for a certain window. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be able to answer that, Bob, because we know they reacted, understandably, to getting run over in the playoffs, quite literally, by getting Derek Harmon in the first round. But I just don't sense that there's a cohesive plan, a unified vision. What do they want to be? And more, I guess, to the point that I'm trying to make, what path do they want to traverse to get there? Mm-hmm. They always say we want to make the playoffs. Mike says I want to make the single elimination tournament. And then the implication is, well, anything can happen. But they aren't building rosters that scare anybody if they drag themselves in at 9-8 every year.
Real quick, let's go to Brandon in Ambridge. Brandon, you have 20 seconds.
Hey, you know, I just don't know anymore how we're supposed to compete with some of these guys. You see in the modern day of NIL that attendance is money, and everybody has better attendance than we do.
Yeah, and listen, that's a tough pill to swallow. When you're a team like Pitt, for example, and you have guys you want to keep around, you're going to come up with some money, and it better be a significant amount of money. And that's what we're going to end with tonight here. Chris, thank you very much, as always. See you again tomorrow night. Thank you guys for calling and tweeting or texting or faxing or whatever you want to do. We'll take it all right here on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Good night.